Hey crew, this is a video of a 3-day, 2-night trip that I took last week to the Steens and the Alvord Desert. You remember my Walks in the Northwest book that Scott Fairley gave me? Well, these are the walks. I've now done 12 of the 75 of them. I did 4 of them on this trip. Okay, Garmin. Save video. They all revolved around the Steens area. It was Crumbo Reservoir was the first one I went to. Then I did Page Springs. Then I did the East Rim Viewpoint. And then I did Kiger Gorge, which are numbers 49 through 52 in the book. So Crumbo Reservoir was the first one, and to get here it was about 3 to 4 miles of washboard road. And it was really nice. It was a quiet little spot with beautiful marshlands, junipers, and some birds. But especially after a 6.5-hour drive where I had to stop a couple times and get gas and buy some supplies for the weekend, I wasn't in the right mindset, I think. And I was walking up the little trail beside the reservoir there, and I was thinking, boy, this isn't particularly spectacular. I could go out to Mackay Dam and probably get similar views and a similar experience, and it would have taken me 10 minutes to drive there. But I think as the trip went on, my attitude got better, and I actually enjoyed the spots I was visiting more. So this was a good one to start with, probably, because it was the least spectacular and the least unusual, but still really a lovely spot. So the drive from there to Page Springs Campground was not very far, and the walk was along this the Blitzen River here, and basically I walked down in this picture to where the big curve is. And we stayed in Page Springs Campground last March, right at the beginning of COVID, when we took our trip to the southwest. We took a week-long trip to the southwest, and our first night was at Page Springs Campground. And I thought about staying actually at some of the campgrounds up in the Steens, but the road was closed because of snow at that time. So this trail was actually a little nicer. It was a little longer, and there were fewer people around. And I mean, there were only a half dozen people at the last trail. And as I walked up it, I saw some deer. I, saw some really beautiful plants. The river was beautiful. And I ended up about a mile upriver. It curves around, and there's this weir, natural or a man-made irrigation system, I believe. And then on the way back down, there was a meadow where I'd seen the deer before, and as I came back, the deer were closer to the trail. And I started taking videos from a distance, and then I just started walking down thinking they would go away. But they just sat there, looked at me, so I stopped at the closest point to them, and I continued taking video. And I think I'll let you just watch what I witnessed. Yeah, so these guys were probably 50 feet away from me while they were doing this. So yeah, that was really fun. And I I probably stood there and watched them for 15 minutes and just took a video a short period of time. I took a bunch of pictures as well. And then I headed back down to the car and drove down to South Steens Campground, which you can see is down here kind of at the low point, about to head up into the mountains themselves. However, it was a 20 or 30 miles on the paved road and then 20 miles on washboard roads. And so I aired down the tires when I got here, and that made a huge difference in the comfort of the ride on the washboard road. But once again, driving down the road here, I was thinking, boy, this is no fun. But I stayed at the campground that night, got up early in the morning, and started heading up into the hills. And that's when I feel like the trip sort of hit its stride. As I headed up into the hills, I passed a couple guys heading out hunting. But basically, those were the only people I saw for the first couple hours I was up here. And as the sun came up, the clouds cleared off, and it really, really turned beautiful. Steens Mountain kind of sticks up out of this great basin, and it has these huge glacial gorges coming off in all directions. Yeah, it was actually colder than 35 degrees, as you can tell. I mean, it was clearly, I think it was probably closer to 30. The last time I looked at the thermometer in the car, it said 35 degrees, and that was further down the mountain.
It's freaking freezing up here. Actually, it's literally freezing up here. But it's beautiful.
Boy, I sure entertain myself, don't I? Yeah, it was beautiful. And the wind, it had to be 20 to 30 miles an hour sustained wind up there. It was, and it just sucked the heat out of you. So after I walked around actually on that was the summit trail, and I actually walked up the summit trail, and then I went to the East Rim Viewpoint Trail, and then to this one, which is where I got on my video, which is Gorge. And the scale of these glacial valleys is just amazing. I mean, those aspen groves down in the bottom look like little moss from this distance. It was really breathtaking. So then I headed down. I was going to the Alvord Desert, and I ran across this guy. He was clearly unhappy about something. So then I aired back up the tires at Page Springs Campground and then looped down around south through Field Station, where I picked up some gas, and then to the Alvord Desert. And you can just drive out on this playa. I am in the middle of the Alvord Desert here. And I don't know if you can hear... Actually, the compressor on the fridge is going, so it's making some noise. But the wind is whipping. I can hear it blowing. And it is now almost 70 degrees here. Maybe 65 degrees, I don't know. Big difference from this morning. It's kind of weird. Now that I'm here, I'm not sure what to do. So I'm going to drive around and see what happens. Yeah, so that's what I did. I drove around. And it is incredibly remote out here. Actually, when I stopped at Field Station to get gas, I asked the guy if he was keeping busy with all this COVID stuff, and he said, yeah, it's just been a constant stream of people. It's driving me crazy. you don't move out here because you want to have a constant stream of people to deal with. And clearly, from this footage, you can tell that's kind of the case. There were a few vehicles I saw driving around out here, but I just parked over here on the far side of the desert and camped out, played the guitar, sang some songs, took pictures, waited till it got dark and took pictures of the stars. And then I went to bed. I actually got on my phone and looked at navigating home. But just really kind of enjoyed being in this spot. It was obviously incredibly peaceful. Got up in the morning, watched the sunrise. So as I said, I navigated on my phone. I had really good cell coverage here, ironically. You're out in the middle of nowhere, but there's a cell tower on top of Steens Mountain in the background there. So in the morning, I deflated my tires again, which I had waited to do to decide which direction I was going. So I ended up deciding to go east from here on a trail. And by the way, I had these deflators. I don't know if I talked to you about them, Karua, that I bought, and they're brass, little brass caps with a spring in them and a valve. And basically you can set them using a couple screws on them to the pressure that you want your tires to deflate to. So normally these tires run at 50 psi, and I deflated them down to about 22. I could have gone lower, but I didn't. And that makes the ride a lot smoother. And so I put on the deflators, and then I sat on the tailgate and ate breakfast, which was really nice. After that, I headed east, as I said, following what I thought was going to be like 5, maybe 10 miles of trail, and then dirt roads. Well, as it turned out, it was a little more extensive than I had bargained for, but it ended up being a good thing. So I started heading east. Here you'll see heading right to the edge of the playa, and then up into the hills, and there was a little canyon I followed up out of there, and Google Maps said it was like 5 miles up this trail. And if you look at this fly through, you'll see at the top there's a thin blue line you can barely see. That's the trail I actually took. If you pause the video, I'm sure you can watch it. Ended up being 30 miles of track, 2-lane track. And heading up out of here, this was about what I was expecting. I was thinking, 5 miles of this, a few washouts, not too bad. And then as I get up here, you'll see I get up on top. Actually, this is coming right out of that little canyon. And it opens up, and you see these wide open sagebrush areas. But the road still isn't bad. It's, you can go 15, 20, 25 miles an hour on it. And I kept on hitting these turns. Google Maps was actually navigating me on this. You can see actually this is more of a stock trail to the left there. And the turns that I kept taking me on narrower and less well-used tracks. And so this was taking me a little bit out of my comfort range. It ended up being nothing that the vehicle couldn't handle. And it was just a good adventure, but it made me nervous, and it pushed my comfort zone, which was probably a good thing. I'd like to go back actually and explore some of these other trails up in this area, because there's a bunch of them. But as I said, it ended up being about 30 miles of this. It took me about 2 hours. There were some parts where it was really crawling. There were some parts where I probably drove a little faster than I should have. But all in all, it was fun, and I didn't see any other vehicles or any other people the whole time I was out here, which was pretty fun as well. And I stopped a couple of places and kind of just enjoyed the solitude. But it was a good chance for me to kind of get a little more confidence in my vehicle, and I was prepared such that if anything went wrong, I didn't have to worry about it. Right at the end here, as we dropped back down into the valley, looping around, you could see there was some sand, and I weenied out. I didn't go through the big ruts, didn't feel a need to prove myself. Got back to the dirt road, got back to pavement, aired up, did the 6 hour drive home from here, 6.5 hours. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. It was a great trip.